This film follows on from my previous kind of theory piece about how autonomic conditioning fits into the rest and pace paradigm. I put a question up on Twitter to see what kind of questions people had on the topic and literally had hundreds back. So I've grabbed a bunch of those questions and I'm going to try and answer them separately in this film, with the proviso that I'm just one person and this is these are my perspectives or my thoughts on the subject. At the end of the day, I'm just a bloke. I kind of see this as the starting point for a discussion. So if you disagree with me, let's start a discussion in the comments around particular questions or particular answers, or where the nuances and subtleties lie in the answers to some of these tricky questions. Anyway, so let's dive in. Question number one. What are the leading theories around what the mechanism behind PEM is? Well, in the main film, I spoke a bit about what I think might be causing it, but if you're talking about leading theories, have a look at this slide, courtesy of Christian Puter, which has been lifted from a presentation, and I was copied it on Twitter. But this has a bunch of the thinking on it, so pause and have a good look. Question number two. How does it feel different to convalescence in other illnesses? I ask this question because myself and some others are unsure if they have PEM. So in the main film, I spoke about the two separate groups identified by Professor Scheibenbogen's research that was published in Nature Communications. And these two groups are primarily differentiated by the timing of when they experience exercise intolerance, essentially. The first group looked much more like ME/CFS, with strong delayed PEM, as in it happens several hours or a day later and it's very severe. The second group had exercise intolerance more immediately upon doing the exercise and then shortly afterwards. So if you're not sure what PEM is, or if you get it, you're probably in this second group. Watch the main film for more discussion on this topic. Question number three. How to find a balance with the tribalism of don't ever go over your limits and don't condition yourself so strongly that you become stuck in fear. What does the middle ground look like? Big question. I think everybody has to find their own middle ground, and it's going to look different for everyone. Fundamentally, this is a place where you don't make your symptoms worse by virtue of what you do, and you can try and remain at the baseline whilst you are still able to be active, you know, up to a point. So if you look at spoon theory, I would say the middle ground essentially involves spending, let's say that you have 10 spoons for the day. The middle ground is spending 9 of them, not spending 11, not spending 15. Obviously the spoons are invisible and they change every day, but if the middle ground, should it exist, involves being active enough that you don't go mad and you sort of look after your mental health, but equally you spend one less spoon than you have available on any given day. Or arguably, people say there's the 80% rule, so maybe it's 8 spoons out of the 10. Question number 4. Does pushing yourself too much, too soon, too often hold back the overall recovery or just cause short-term PEM? So the ME community will tell you that the people who've become very severe for a very long period of time often did so through continually trying to push, basically. And you have to look at those experiences and say it's a really bad idea. So any time that you feel like you've done too much, you need to back right off and spend a period of time getting yourself back to a baseline before you can start to put any more any more activity back into the mix again. Next question, is there a risk of resting too much? Essentially, I would say the answer to this is no, and radical rest is widely prescribed and pretty sensible and pretty safe. We can maybe talk a little bit about deconditioning here. So let's take me, for example. I was marathon fit when I caught COVID, and since I've long COVID, I've not run or done any specific exercise in 3 years. Nothing that would increase any kind of aerobic fitness. Am I deconditioned from where I was marathon fit? Yes. Is that deconditioning enough to stop me, lifting something heavy or doing something for 20 seconds that's 95% of what I could do before? No. So I think this deconditioning thing is really complex. It's obviously not responsible for our symptoms. If you were to radically rest for 6 months and not leave the house, then you probably would become slightly less aerobically fit. Still, again, this is the sort of thing that's not going to contribute to your systems. You're far more likely to benefit from the rest than you are to suffer from the loss of fitness. And at whatever points that you are able then to start being active again, that basic level of fitness should in theory come back. Now, one thing that's also worth talking about here is the muscle weakness that people describe in long COVID. I'm not of the opinion that this is deconditioning or actual muscle wastage. This is either a neurological or a lactic acid issue here. Basically, we're not able to actually fire the muscles in these scenarios, as opposed to the muscles simply not being able to do the work. So important distinction there. Next question, how do we know when we're well enough to, say, drive to the gym and then still be able to swim? So I think this is about putting activities together. For me, I would say try doing one half of that first. Try driving to the gym or driving somewhere and back end that's that's that far, that much energy spend. Do you get symptoms from that alone? And if the actual drive there does you in without actually doing the thing, then you need to think about what you can do from home that doesn't involve that drive or whatever. Again, everything has a spoon cost, and you simply try and have to add up the spoons of any of those individual elements and see if you can put more than one into any given day. The answer may frequently be no. Next question, possible warning signs for doing too much. This is so specific to everyone. I think everybody has their own specific warning signs, and really you've just got to learn your own. I don't think I can generalize on this because it is so different for everyone. Next question. My doctors have talked about their patients with long COVID getting over the hump, doing activity that pushes the boundaries. Is there a formula for this that others have found? I don't like this. Refer to my main film on where autonomic conditioning fits into rest and pace. I think this is a really complex issue, and it depends what those doctors are trying to get the patients to push. Is that actually an interpretation of autonomic conditioning where whatever you do is within your amount of available spoons and is done very carefully with very strong regard to how your symptoms react? Or is it about pushing your symptoms and trying to make them worse? That sounds a bit like graded exercise therapy to me, so I don't like that idea. In the questions, in the comments, please do, if you have found a formula for this, everyone, please chime in, but I don't think so. Next question, whether or not it's possible to have a standardized protocol for pacing. There are principles of pacing, and I talk about this in my Long Covid Handbook. There are a number of guiding principles that can help, but beyond that, protocols, no, because everybody has their own different levels of tolerance, so different numbers of spoons, and then also different spoon costs for any activities, right? So it might cost me 3 spoons to have a shower, it might cost you 5. So any different thing has its own individual cost. We all find different things taxing. So no, the general principles here, which are essentially do less, do differently, break those activities up. I've got a link a film up here, a long film talking about pacing. So huge subject, watch that film. Next question, when to know it's time and safe to increase activity level, so that's more activities or longer periods of the same activities, and how to go ahead? Well, the answer to this, I would say, is if you haven't experienced PEM for quite a period of time, like weeks, then you can maybe try and add something or do a bit more of something and leave several days after that before you try and do it again, so that you properly give your, that crash time to happen if it's going to happen. And if it doesn't, then maybe you can build up another 10% each time, but be really careful. And then this question goes into some specifics. If exercising, what amount, repetition, minutes and distance. If socializing, what duration, number of people, location. So I think the important thing here is that you bring the sort of the elements of pacing into this too. So let's say that you want to go for a 15-minute walk. It's probably sensible to stop every couple of minutes for a minute and actually just sit down or rest and then do a bit more. So breaking up the activity you're doing, I think, is really important. When it comes to socializing, it depends on how taxing you find it, right? Some people find it more taxing than others. Location, anywhere that's noisy is going to be particularly hard. So fewer people, less noisy locations, fewer bright lights. You don't have to travel too far to get there. Try and keep things as simple as possible, I would say, generally speaking. Next question, how do you distinguish between PEM and a relapse rather than just feeling tired as a normal person? Well, I think this goes back to our 2 groups. And this is where I think actually, if you don't know that you're feeling PEM, you're probably in group 2, because trust me, if you're feeling it and you're in group 1, or rather feeling it defines you as being in group 1, you really know about it. So next question, why with extra rest after PEM starts resolving does heart rate variability improve? Well, this is about I would argue, your body finding its way back into a parasympathetic state from the sympathetic overdrive that's a consequence of PEM in the first place. And then next, how to maintain improved HRV. Breath work, meditation, pacing, avoiding stressful, difficult scenarios, and making sure that you take breaks anytime that you're doing anything remotely strenuous, whether that's cognitive or physical. Next question. Love to hear what objective metrics can be used to measure your bandwidth and ensure you do what you can. A lot of people will find that they have a step count that is a pretty good indication of how active they've been in a day. So if you've got a watch or some other kind of thing that can measure your steps, your phone will do it. You might find that you're a 2,000 a step day person and more than 2,000 is too much, or maybe it's 5,000 for you. Maybe if you're very lucky, it's 10,000. Maybe if you're unlucky, it's 500. I know people who've literally that, and you'll do that just going to the bathroom a couple of times. So a step count's a pretty simple, easy objective metric. The other thing is keeping an eye on your heart rate, and anytime your heart rate goes over a certain point, observing what symptoms happen as a consequence, and then you can learn what heart rate limit is for you. So if I'm pottering around the house and my heart rate hits 120, I start to feel quite unwell. So I know I've immediately got to, lie down and stop pottering about. So, that's going to be a little bit different for everyone too. But essentially it's those sorts of things, keeping an eye on them and seeing at what point your symptoms get worse and then trying to stay under that level. Next question. Why does PEM feel like a sense of beginning to get flu? Why a sore throat? So this is likely the immune system essentially starting to overreact as a consequence of you having done too much. And this is an inflammatory reaction, but that feeling of flu and of the sore throat implies there is an immune system overreaction. Now, I'm not an immunologist, so I can't answer that fully, but that is my understanding of it. How to work out your anaerobic threshold at home. I've seen 220 minus age times 0.55. Work well suggest resting HR plus 15, but that seems very conservative. Yeah, so again, you've just got to find your own level here. I mean, I'm sorry, all of these Q&As are basically, you've got to work it out for yourself, but that's kind of it. There's some guiding principles, and then you've just got to see what works for you. That 0.55 times max is a very broad idea, generally safe for most people, but not for everyone. That work well one is a bit more conservative to be safe for more people, but again, it depends where you are and how severe you are as to what your particular sort of management heart rate would be to not overdo it. Another question here, is PEM damaging, not just horrible? Yes, it might be, but we don't have hard evidence on that beyond the stories and anecdotal reports of people with ME/CFS who pushed through PEM and then found that it got long-term more severe. So that's the end of my questions for the moment. Hope they were vaguely interesting. If you've got more, chuck them in the comments and we'll see what kind of answers we can provide from the wisdom of crowds and the rest of it. Look after yourselves. Until next time.